Alright guys, so we're going to get back into the lore of the creation of the moon caused by the Earth and Theia collision. And we're going to go to the whiteboard scenario, and we're also going to predict a lot of things, basically what led up to the collision, and also we're going to think of some alternate history. What if the collision between Earth and Theia never happened? What would Earth look like if, you know, Theia never collided with Earth, and also what would Theia look like if we brought Theia to the present? So we're going to get to a recap of everything that happened and how the moon was formed. Let's get started. So before we actually get into the lore of the inner solar system, including Theia, we want to also talk about the entire solar system as a whole. So we're going to go circa 4.6 billion years ago when the sun was fully formed out of that cloud of dust and gas called a nebula. As the sun took shape, so did the other planets. So remember, when you had the planets, you had thousands and thousands of rocky planets that were just forming. And then you had a gravitational influences with the big gas giants in the outer reaches. And mainly one of all, the oldest planet of them all, is Jupiter. Jupiter was a wrecking ball. It was, you know, going towards the inner solar system, and then Saturn eventually formed. Saturn formed a 2-in-1 gravitational resonance where it pulled Jupiter back out and forced it to go back to its current orbit. But Jupiter just kept wandering and wandering and wandering and get pulled out. But also, this caused an extra gas planet to be flung out of its orbit, and that planet is actually Planet X. Or also, we also found that there's Planet Y and other planets that may have formed right around Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune's orbits as well. But what happened to most of those were flung out because of Jupiter and Saturn's, gravitational resonance, and Jupiter's wandering and Saturn pulling it in. But also, Planet X was flung out. This caused Uranus and Neptune to be flung in different positions where it was swapped orbits quite frequently. So Neptune was closer to the sun than Uranus, and then Uranus was further out, and then Uranus was now closer to the sun, Neptune was further out. So this caused a swap, and then this set up a creative mess that began to form Pluto and the other trans-Neptunian worlds, basically, because of this gravitational shift between the gas giants. So now we're going to get to the next chapter. What was happening in the chaotic mess of the inner solar system? All right, so we're going to the next chapter about the crowded inner solar system. So mind you that the inner solar system wasn't always Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. It was the beginnings before Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars even formed. They were actually formed out of thousands of rocky planets before them. And what happened to them was, like I said, when we began with the last chapter, was because of Jupiter's migration in and out, and Saturn's gravitational influence by pulling Jupiter towards its current orbit. All these little rocky planetesimals that were just crowding the inner solar system began to collide with each other, fuse, get ejected, or actually get flung into the sun, even. So this was a terminal amount of chaos over millions and millions and millions of years. Eventually, from thousands of rocky planets down to hundreds of rocky planets. And then from hundreds to tens of rocky planets. And eventually, where we see Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and adding Theia into it. So, there's a new study that suggests that Theia was actually formed much closer to the sun than Earth was. But I'm going to make a theory that makes it up. What if Venus had something to do with Theia's collision course with Earth? Here's why. So the force of gravity between the sun and Venus played a role. Understanding where Theia was. So Theia was possibly right between the orbits between Venus and Earth, right? At one point. Just enough to have a sync between. Also, it was actually formed closer to Venus. Remember, the solar system wasn't as placed and grounded as it was today. Remember, each planet was just wandering in and out because there was a gravitational shift between adjusting to the chaos of what happened millions of years beforehand. So it took some time to figure out the orbit situation where you still had planets that were ejected, some of them were colliding into each other, and then there was some other turmoil going on. So suggesting that Theia was closer to Venus's orbit than Earth's orbit suggests that there was enough feel of a gravitational sync between Venus, the sun, and Venus itself. So suggesting that Venus played a role into ejecting Theia out of its orbit into a direct collision course with Earth. And this probably suggests that as Venus ejected Theia out because it was maybe too close to Venus and it was still feeling that gravity, where as Venus was growing, still remember all these planets were still growing. They were close to present day size. Basically, they were still pulling in bigger objects, but Theia was too close. So pretty much Venus's early gravity flung Theia out, and this prompted that Theia was actually flung so fast at a very high orbit, and this also led to why, Theia was traveling at 20,000 miles per hour at a 45-degree angle at the time of collision. So Earth was molten, where surface temperature were 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit 4.5 billion years ago. So the collision was happening 45 degrees at 20,000 miles per hour, right? That was just a high enough speed and angle, because remember, the reason why we actually know that these numbers was because of computer simulations that we're talking about. So imagine having thousands and thousands of computer simulations all going at once. And so if something happened where scientists played with a possibility that Earth survived the collision, but Theia didn't. So Theia, upon collision, completely obliterated itself, forcing billions of tons of debris, causing Earth's mantle and crust to be flung out. So all these billions of tons of chunks were just, ejected. And then the impact accelerated Earth's rotation, where an entire day lasted only 3 to 4 hours. So eventually, in a short amount of time, this happened, that debris cloud, and that was controlled by Earth's gravity, forced that cloud into a ring, where all this crust and mantle, and also Theia's remains, formed a thin ring, later accreted to form our moon. And that was just a short amount of time. So maybe it took hours, maybe it took months, who knows? But this result of that collision created Earth's tilt of 23.5 degrees. Did you know that? So, moon currently at 238,000 miles, and it's still drifting. It's about 3.8. It's 3.8 centimeters a year, basically. But realize though that the moon formed closer to Earth, about 20 times closer to Earth, because of that, how that ring settled. So the moon was 20 times closer to Earth during the formation, making the tidal forces 8,000 times than today. So the moon exerted 8,000 times that gravitational force on Earth. at the time. Because remember, tidal forces actually go by the cubed of what's promptly projected. So 20 times 20 times 20. So 20 times 20 is 400 times, another 20 is 8,000. So yeah. So this pretty much created a new balance. So now you have the moon formed and then Earth was, survived. The moon stabilized the Earth just enough to lengthen the time more, where at that time, 4.5 billion years ago, the entire day only lasted 8 to 10 hours. And the moon did all it can to stabilize Earth's tilt to make it at 23.5 degrees. So, yeah. So, we're going to get into the alternate history of what if the collision between Earth and Theia never happened? What would Earth look like, even Theia, if they never collided? You need to understand that the moon is very important to life on Earth because without the moon, life on Earth wouldn't really promptly exist because, one, like I said, the moon created a stable enough tilt and stabilized Earth's rotation speed. But without the collision course between Earth and Theia, because of the tidal forces, and if it happened today, right now, without the influence of the moon, Earth's tidal forces will be a disaster with chaotic tilting. So imagine the wobbling that the Earth will be having if the moon just didn't play a role in stabilizing. Sorry. Yeah. So Earth about 23.5 degrees on its axis. So imagine without the moon stabilizing, the Earth will just be doing this. It will just be rocking back and forth. This will create tides, just unbearable tides because of that extreme tilt. Seasons will also dramatically change as well because we have Earth's current tilt path where basically as we're into the winter in a couple weeks, the Earth's northern hemisphere tilts away, but we're actually closer to the sun during the winter months. Summer months, we're furthest away from the sun, where the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, whereas the southern hemisphere is tilted away, being winter. And then, like during the winter, Earth's northern hemisphere is tilted away. The southern hemisphere now it's summer because the southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. Fall, spring, equinox because they get equal days and nights. So imagine if that never happened, if we never had the influence of the moon, basically the season will be all out of whack. So Uranus seasons are dramatically weird because it tilts on its side at 98.7 degrees. So yeah, basically like a barrel, right? So that's actually the influence that if without the moon, Earth's tilt can probably looking like Uranus's tilt, basically, where seasons will last 20 years, even. And yeah, without the collision, Earth's axial tilt will be out of whack. Earth's tilt will dramatically change. And also, if we brought Theia to the present day, what would they look like? Would Earth still be habitable? Probably yes. Maybe. But it just wouldn't look like the Earth like we know it today. Theia, maybe. Depends on where it could be in an orbit, in an alternate orbit, where it will be easy enough to create habitability. So maybe it will maybe not be like Earth-like if Theia was brought to the present day, if the collision never happened. Life on Earth, life on Theia, maybe. I'm not sure. But I just gotta say, without the collision, things would dramatically change for the Earth today. If we never had the influence of the moon's formation. Earth's rotation will be so fast and the Earth's tilting will be so dramatic, and it's, complete chaos. So it's a good thing that we have the moon to this day. Current distance of 238,000 miles, and it's, like I said, it's slowly drifting away, just only 3.8 centimeters a year. Where, like I said, we are comfortably almost at 24 hours, so 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds. The moon's influence stabilizes the Earth at 23.5 degrees. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next video. Bye.